when we created our yoga teacher training, we knew that it was going to be a 10-week thing. It was on the weekends. We were trying to make it most accessible for people. And none of us had children at the time. And now we all have, well, I had a kiddo at the time. I guess my son was really small at the time, but we were still trying to make it work. And then I listened to you explaining how you guys have set up yours, and that sounds like lovely. And I think it's going to be wonderful. But I think we go into it oftentimes thinking like there's only one right way. And really our people are going to come to us and have the yoga experience that they need to have for their lived experience. And I think it's really important to think of that too. Like the puzzle is going to end up being the puzzle, whatever it is, however you put the pieces together. But your way is not right and my way is not right. It's just different. And looking at how your brain can put together the pieces of the puzzle that it needs to so that it works for you, because you have to be able to teach it. And also knowing that like you're making it more accessible for other yogis to be able to teach yoga eventually is so important. And I think it helps eliminate this fear that like if it's different or someone else is already doing it. I feel like both of those things are like completely opposite sides of the same coin of like, you just have to come and do the thing that you're excited to do, teach yoga and share yoga, and it's going to fall into place the way that it's meant to fall into place. And it's okay. It's perfect. It's right exactly how you set it up, and do it until you change it, because you're going to need to change it at some point.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to MYYT, where you are learning to level up your yoga teaching one masterful class at a time. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but last night I went out for the first time in what felt like forever and was on purpose awake past 10 p.m. My husband and I, we had an incredible date night where we saw the world premiere and the opening of the disco show here in Las Vegas. This is the show that my husband has been going to rehearsals for the last 2 or so-ish months because he is one of the understudies in the covers for one of the leading roles. And we had the opportunity to see the opening, and it was a big celebratory night and just so much fun. But I'm like, man, I feel so old. I can't hang anymore and staying out past 10. We got home at 1 a.m., which obviously isn't too late, but it has thrown off my whole cycle. And I'm like, my voice feels tired and ragged from hooping and hollering for this incredible cast in the show and talking above really loud music. But all that to say, it was a really awesome time. It was fun to dress up. The concept of the show being disco, everybody really understood the assignment of how to dress up in the disco theme and style. And when you walk into the space, it felt like you were in a time capsule. All of the furniture is like super retro and 70s, and everybody was wearing disco outfits. I found this really incredible. It almost looks like a disco ball itself. It was like a disco top at a consignment store, I guess almost like an antique store actually. And the second I saw it, I was like, I have to grab that for the opening. And I got so many compliments on it. Colin was wearing these like long bell-bottom pants with slivers of glitter silver. So we dressed up, but also so did everybody else. So that was really fun to just be like, wow, I actually feel like I am in the disco era right now. And the concept of the show is unique in the sense that the theater doesn't have any seats. So you walk in and it's just this like cube and basically a dance floor. And throughout the show, you are learning little snippets of choreography. And by the end of it, the whole audience can collectively do this mini dance number to the song We Are Family. So it's an absolute blast. We had such a great time. And it's just an amazing addition to the incredible shows that are here in Las Vegas. And I cannot wait to see my husband play the role that he's been understudying. He is the full-time Blue Jackson at the Atomic Saloon show here in Vegas. But Speaker World, the production company, has 2 other shows, and this disco show is the new and the newest one. So the character that he's covering is basically the host that teaches the audience these little snippets of choreography. And the character is actually based off of a real person, this like Norwegian Zumba instructor. And it's just ridiculous. He's got this like Norwegian accent. He's teaching these little like choreography bits, but at the same time peppering through these stories of like his past and his upbringing in life. And then in true Speaker World fashion, it's like it takes this weird turn where it's like either really dark or really raunchy. as you would expect in Vegas. So it'll be really funny to watch my husband in that role, and I can't wait to see it. And I'm so glad I was able to go. Baby Finn had a babysitter here. We found an amazing person that we feel really cares for Finn, and just the sweetest, was sending us pictures the whole time. And since it was a little bit of a later event, we left the house at around 8:45. He pretty much slept for her the whole time, which was great. And Baby Finn, is currently cutting his 2 top front teeth. So we've got the top left really coming in, and then the right isn't too far behind, which is so sweet. And I feel like it makes your baby look so much older when you can see their teeth. He doesn't have that little turtle smile for too much longer. And I'm really trying to like take mental snapshots and pictures of how he looks just as this little baby who's growing up so fast. Let's see what else is going on. I have been building the slides for the Yogipreneur Mastermind, and I'm having so much fun creating all of this content. The first week is all around igniting the entrepreneurial spirit and what exactly it means to start acting like a boss. So that content is coming together, and my slide building skills have dramatically increased over my last couple of years of really going all in on making more helpful content for yoga teachers. So I'm looking at all of them like, man, these are really good. I can't believe I built these. Just even a couple of years ago, I would have been really, really stressed about this task. And I've pretty much found a couple of systems and really great templates to use. And I know much more how to plan and prepare a lesson and then create the accommodating slides with it. I've also, for this particular week, when it's all around setting up kind of the foundations for business, recording a pretty awesome track called Connecting with Your Future Self. And I had so much fun writing that script and found this beautiful story that I absolutely love to really paint that picture. And it's just, I hope that you are experiencing this too, in whatever you're going through right now in your yoga teaching, that you are feeling just as fulfilled, inspired by the things that you're creating for your students, that you also feel like you're getting back in the act of giving. That's just the best space. We finally started recording the first few trainings for our yoga teacher training. Rachaka is my separate business and retreat company, and we just launched our first yoga teacher training that we will be beginning next spring, in the spring of 2025. And we sat down and recorded the first couple of videos. This is such a pinch me moment. I can't even believe that it's real. I'm sitting down and I'm looking at this manual that I helped write, and it looks so professional and it looks so thoughtful and so much better than the one that I received. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe this is happening, because at one point it was really just this inspired idea in my head. And I can't believe that it's reality now, that it's not just this pipe dream or something that I said that I always wanted to do, but it's actually happening. And so that felt really good to sit down, hit record, and have the actual manual. It's like a physical thing. It's a real product out and about. And we started that. So I am so glad to be doing that. And between the yoga teacher training videos and creating the slides for the Yogipreneur Mastermind, these are just things I knew that I wanted to do, but that I very could have easily been like, here's all these excuses as to why I don't feel ready, or I don't feel enough, or I don't know how to do these things. And although those thoughts came up for me, I persisted through, and daily I am doing it before I feel ready, before I feel qualified. And I have those voices of doubt, of course, but I'm just deciding to start and to take messy action. And I say all that not to toot my own horn, but to encourage you to do the same thing, that it's okay to have all those feelings of insecurity, of fear, but keep believing in yourself and keep choosing to stretch yourself, and know that that space of discomfort is when you're really on the right track. It's the month of September, and that means that my husband and I were about to celebrate our 7th wedding anniversary, which is insane. I don't understand how, especially since having a baby, how quickly time is going. But these last 7 years have been so beautiful, and marriage is just the best. And my husband got us this Groupon kind of experience to go to Lake Havasu, which isn't too far from Vegas. It's going to be the first time that we're leaving baby Finn for a couple of nights. So wish this mama good luck as she leaves the baby for 2 nights, but we're only 2 hours away. And my mom and my family is coming here to take care of baby Finn. So he's going to be well cared for during that time. And if anything happens, we can always turn around. But I'm really looking forward to that too. And then in October, just a little less than a month away, I'm hosting my second yoga retreat of the year. It's called Vortex in Sedona, Arizona. And so I'm prepping my mind and starting to read the book that we base the entire itinerary off of. And it's all around the chakras, which is always such a obviously interesting topic, period. But it's just something that's really nice as a yoga teacher to revisit. And every time you come back to material, how something new sticks out and how the knowledge starts to sink even deeper. This week, I had the privilege of speaking with Clair Thomas, who is also a Las Vegas local here. We have plans to meet up this week, the week that her episode airs, to meet in person and grab some lunch or a coffee. She was just an absolute privilege to chat with. Inside this episode, we talk about things like professionalism for yoga teachers and how to apply the yamas and the niyamas in yoga business. We talk about how poverty prevents us from serving and that we as yoga teachers are also meant to transcend harm and suffering. What someone with a master's in curriculum and instruction design has to say about the Yoga Alliance application and approval process, why it's so difficult for experts to teach beginners, how to use your life experiences as sources of inspiration for your classes without just talking about yourself for an hour, how puzzling and dot connecting can help you plan your classes, and so much more, like the struggles of building a business and the temptation of chasing certificates and the daily task of facing old beliefs. This episode is so full, and I know it's going to help you so much. So turn it up and let's dive in. Hey yogis, Mackenzie Fly here, mom, yogapreneur, teacher trainer, retreat leader, and your guide to master your yoga teaching. This podcast is your weekly dose of actionable wisdom and candid chats with industry experts. Learn to connect deeper, weave yogic magic, and lead by example. Full disclosure, I'm still mastering it too, but together we'll skyrocket your impact and income. Hit subscribe and let's grow, one episode at a time. Clair Thomas is a seasoned yoga instructor and co-owner of Solstice Yoga School in Las Vegas with over a decade of experience. She is passionate about promoting overall well-being and spiritual, physical, and emotional health through yoga, Reiki, and building value-based branding and culture. Clair specializes in yoga philosophy, Ayurveda, mobility, and nutrition, teaching an infusion of Forest Baptiste and Budokan yoga. She also coaches yoga teachers and Reiki practitioners and developed the curriculum for Solstice Yoga School's 200 and 300-hour teacher trainings. Clair has an impressive list of certifications, including a 300-hour advanced YTT and a Budokan yoga teacher certification, as well as a Reiki and other fitness and coaching certifications. Her approach to teaching is that of a storyteller and a puzzle builder, taking different learnings and weaving them together to create a beautiful tapestry. Outside of yoga, Clair enjoys hiking, camping, horseback riding, game night with friends, and eating amazing food. Fun fact, she was born in Germany and believes she was Cuban in a past life. Welcome to the podcast, Clair. I am so excited that you're here.
Thank you, Mackenzie. I'm excited to be here myself.
I don't think we can start anywhere other than there of just being like, how did it come to be that you believe that you're Cuban in a past life? There's got to be a story with that.
So I love salsa dancing and all foods that are Cuban. And so my dad ended up marrying my stepmom, and she's Cuban, and her whole family would all get together and dance and sing and play music. And it was like so natural for me to just like fit right in. I love speaking Spanish and all the things. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that I must have been doing this in a past life because I just was like, I missed the mark. I was supposed to be born Cuban.
Well, That's awesome. We were chatting before we clicked record that we are a stone's throw away from each other. Both Claire and I are in Las Vegas, and we have plans to meet up and meet one another live and living color because I didn't know you. I just found you on Instagram. And so that's the beauty of the internet. So I'm excited to open this doorway. So tell me about your side of Las Vegas. How long have you been here and how's it going? And kind of where are you doing yoga in Las Vegas?
Yeah, so I've been in Vegas basically my whole life. I was born in Germany, that is true, but we came over here when I was pretty young. My dad was military and I left. I kept trying to leave. I've tried to leave Vegas so many times for various things, my undergrad, and then I tried to teach out of the state, and I just kept coming back. And so once I finally decided that like Vegas was home and I was going to stick it out and trust the process, I left my 15-year teaching career to pursue teaching yoga. And like as things work out, all the pieces fit together nicely. And the DTLV at the time, it was called DTLV Co op, was opening up. And they were just doing a yoga teaching style co op. But there wasn't really a manager of the studio. There wasn't really anyone to like manage the yoga teachers. And since it was a co op style, everybody was like every man for himself. So I approached the owner and said, "Hey, I would love to kind of manage the space because I was spending as much time as possible there because I really wanted to build up my yoga teaching because I had left my career." And so, one of the biggest challenges that I found in the yoga space, like working with these yoga teachers, was that they didn't have a sense of professionalism, a lot of them. And I don't mean that in any other way than that, like, it was kind of like, no one signed up for my class, so I'm not going to show up. And then someone would come and it would fall under the co-op's name, right? So like it wasn't this one teacher, it became the co-op's problem. And so I really felt passionate about like finding this place for yoga teachers where they could come and have this sense of agency and professionalism and like want more than just to show up for their $50 an hour, but to really take yoga into how they teach and into the spaces where they're teaching. And so that's kind of how my passion and dreams, my corner of Vegas has been wonderful to answer that part of the question. But I think it's been wonderful because I've been finding and building a community of yoga teachers that are excited to show up in a different way in the yoga community. And that to me has been pivotal.
Wow, that's beautiful. So with Solstice, the studio that you are a huge hand in creating their curriculum and program, since it has two locations, are there just two studios that you manage, or how are there two?
So yeah, great question. So back to the story. So when the co-op, like there was other owners, and then those owners were transitioning, and like it wasn't really doing the thing that they thought it was going to do. And several of the owners decided to leave the co-op. And then two of us decided, hey, we've created this teacher training anyways. Why don't we rebrand it and make it our own? So there's three of us total. Samantha Okamura, who is in California. So I'll touch on that in a minute. And then Adriana Lee and myself are both in Vegas. So the three of us were all here in Vegas at the time when we rebranded Solstice, and we started our teacher training. So when we first did our teacher training, it was under the DTLV, Downtown Las Vegas Co-op. And then when we rebranded, we took our yoga teacher training obviously with us and rebranded it as Solstice. So all three of us are lead teachers, and Samantha along the way ended up getting married and having a baby, and her family moved to California, which is where she's from. And we ran our first Solstice Yoga out of Walnut Creek at the former gym there this year, in the beginning of this year. So basically what happened was we don't have an actual brick and mortar location of our own. We teach our teacher trainings at other studio locations, and kind of make it more about online, more about this like online presence. But our teacher trainings, we have pretty much agreed it needs to be in person, because it just allows for certain aspects of it, the hands-on assists. Just like I like the community aspect, I find that connection is so important. And though I love the internet and I love the fact that I can work from home and Zoom and do podcasts and things like that, I find that especially with yoga, it's so important to have that piece of actual physical connection. So we've decided to keep most of our training in person. We do have aspects that are online, but anyways, it makes it a little bit easier though, because now that she's in California and I'm here in Vegas, we're able to have two locations. We're building out both locations, which is fantastic. And we have dreams of actually, we're in the works of starting another one in Washington soon. So it's been cool.
Wow, so exciting. Congratulations for that expansion. I absolutely want to pick your brain about the process of writing your own yoga teacher training manual and becoming a yoga school. But before we unpack all of that, you touched on the professionalism in the sense of helping yoga teachers really bring in yoga teachings as the foundation for running business. Is there more that you want to say on that in terms of how to do it in a way that's both profitable and sustainable?
Yeah, so I really feel like we miss the mark sometimes as yoga teachers, thinking that it's supposed to be just the woo woo and where it's helpful and serving. So it's supposed to be, low cost or free. And I saw a lot of teachers, I think when they have that mentality, it makes it much easier to be like, well, this was just a service anyway. So I didn't have to show up in a certain kind of way or do this thing a certain kind of way. So I started getting really deep into the yoga philosophy. So, just a random side note here. When I started taking yoga teacher training, I did it because I wanted to do handstands and arm balances. So I never had I never had an intention of teaching. And so what ended up happening was that I like fell in love during my teacher training. Like I was like, there's so much more to this. And so I almost immediately during my teacher training fell into this, like, I need to know more about the yamas and the niyamas and the eight limbs. But I didn't really like that wasn't the focus of our teacher training. Like it was like hey, here's an introduction. So when I created our teacher training, that was a huge part of it for me. Well, in going down that rabbit hole and going into the deep dives, I had an understanding that basically, if we just got rid of all of the other ones and just focused in on tapas and the niyamas, we're really supposed to be disciplined and we're really supposed to trust that we have what it takes to show up, but also that the universe will support us the rest of the time if we do what it takes to show up. And so I think that a big part of it for me with like having a sustainable and profitable business is that as yogis or yoga teachers, or I know that some people are uncomfortable saying yogis, we really have a responsibility to make enough money so that we can serve. And so a lot of people will say things about like, well, the yogis of back when, they weren't being paid, but they were. That's not actually factual. So they were being paid, maybe not with money, but people would like bring them food. They had their housing taken care of. Like they were the big gurus. And so then when their students came, they never went without. And so maybe they weren't like wealthy and like making millions, but they were definitely having an exchange so that they could live and be profitable and continue teaching, because no one who's in poverty is able to actually serve the way that I believe that us as yoga teachers or yogis, or I call them yoga leaders, are intended to. And so a big part to me is continuing to go back through the eight limbs, especially I love the yama and the niyama in particular, and just talk about like how like when we talk about nonviolence, for example, it's supposed to be nonviolence for ourselves and for others. And it's not really kind or compassionate to yourself if you feel like you have to just give, and you're never receiving. And so things like that, like little tweaks by looking at the actual yoga philosophy shows us that we're not supposed to be living in poverty. And so it's important to weave that aspect into how we show up as yoga teachers. So not showing up to your students because they didn't sign up ahead of time. It's like, well, what are you teaching your students when they do show up? If you say on the thing that you accept drop-ins, then it becomes your responsibility. You've put that out there. You haven't, like, that's the boundary that you set. So you have to show up for them that way, because it hits on, nonviolence. It hits on honesty and being true, truthful and speaking to your truth. It hits on then just like discipline and showing up and having that sausha, the cleanliness that between you, the energy between you and your students. So I think that like we take the yama and the niyama out of context so much, but it's like, no, it's like, it's energetic as much as it is physical, as much as it is, mental and emotional.
Yes. Wow. That was so, so wonderful. I loved all of that. And I found myself as I was just building out this basically like a yoga teacher business mastermind, I found myself wanting to name the modules from like the eight limbs and especially the yamas and the niyamas. So I was like, this is brahmacharya in it. This is saucha, just everything that you were saying of like, look at it through this lens. And that's what's so beautiful about them is that depending on how deep you kind of want to go, that it really like you could use it as a lens to look at your entire life, but definitely look at it for how you're doing business too, and that it will elevate it. I particularly loved what you said about yoga teachers already. I actually wrote about this in my post yesterday. We already are empathetic, highly sensitive people. We are overgivers. We're willing to bend over backwards, but at our expense. And it's so true that we will hurt and harm ourselves and like basically make ourselves a martyr, in the name of this, which it's good intention, but I just really appreciate what you say. And I think so many people need to hear it too, that you can't serve from like the cliche, you can't give from an empty cup.
Well, and I want to just say the two things that came to mind. So the first is that I feel like it's just as much from a place of ego when we want to be martyr as it is from a place, if we want to be like selfish or whatever. Like, I think that the balance is truly necessary. So our ego is calling us to be martyrs because that's like, I'm better than, it makes me this look a certain way. And like, I think that when we're truly living from our soul's purpose, like for our soul's purpose, from our soul, not letting ego be in control, we don't want to be a martyr. We recognize that we need self-care. We need to have balance. We need to have our own yoga practice in order to give. The other thing I wanted to point out is that there's a book that I recommend and talk about called The Jewel of Abundance. And it truly just ties all of yoga philosophy back into we are not meant to be here to suffer and struggle, and not having enough is going to cause suffering and struggle. So if for whatever reason you've decided to come down this yoga path, you'll realize that the whole point of yoga is this unification, this bliss, right? And part of that is being able to take care of yourself. So both of those pieces are kind of like, we think we've been taught to have these beliefs that if we are martyrs and we're just giving and serving, that it's better. But truly, from a yoga perspective and from like looking at ego and soul and all of those things perspective, it's really not.
Mm. Yeah. And this is the world that we live in. If it was common practice to be given, housing, kind of like some of these gurus in the past, but that's not happening here, and so it's unrealistic to think that. And our system is built on money and capitalism. So yeah. So anyway, thank you for that. Really appreciate it. So then as I'm particularly interested because my business partner and we recently submitted our manual to Yoga Alliance and received accreditation. We got approved. Yay. So thank you so much. We are so happy. And as somebody who's been through it, can you believe that process? The application alone, it took us a whole week. And so I want to hear how it went for you and for any yoga teachers out there listening who have this desire to write their own. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the process or any tips and tricks that you learned along the way when you went through it?
Yeah, so I feel like the 300 was actually easier for me than the 200, but I think it's just because of sheer like having done the 200, so I knew what to expect during the 300. Um, I think I have a little bit of like a leg up because I went to school for that. Like, I have a master's in curriculum and instruction design. So for me, it was like I could take the pieces that the Yoga Alliance provided and then just kind of fill in the blanks based on what I knew. I understand writing objectives. Honestly, I have this dream, like, we talk about 5-year, 10-year visions. I really have this dream of supporting other yoga teachers who want to write their own curriculum, because like, I think that the more people that are writing solid curriculum and bringing solid yoga into the world is better. And I'm like, if that's a way I can help people, I'm here for it. But I think the process is really important. And a lot of people don't like Yoga Alliance because it's the monopoly and it's the only one and all of these things. But I see the value in it from a teacher perspective, and like not a yoga teacher, but a true like educator, having gone to school and worked in universities and all of these things perspective, because it does help you to really focus on choosing what content you're talking about, having to write objectives so that you know that you're meeting a need and that you set these goals, to meet the objective. So they're keeping it so that hopefully most yoga teacher trainings are providing enough context so that you can go in and be a quality yoga teacher. So I think that again, like the concept what they want is to do what they're trying to do is solid. Is it working? Medium, right? Like I still know there's a lot of yoga schools that are not the best. Like people, I know that I've had students come to take my training that have taken a 200-hour before, and they're like, "Oh, I actually feel like I can teach now," and I'm like, "Oh, that's good, that's solid." But I think the process is unnecessarily complex, but I only think it's that because they don't really walk you through how to do it. So you get just like a lot of information and then you get feedback when you do it wrong. And so if I was working for Yoga Alliance, I would love to go in there and be like, let's break this down. Like you need to look at this area. So let's say we're talking about methodology and take the methodology and then tell me what are these objectives and like how do I need to meet these objectives? But if you go in there and you just see all these words on paper and it's like methodology, these are the things to cover, you're kind of like, what does that mean?
I was listening to I think it was a lecture on a business mastermind or business opportunity. And the woman was talking about how sometimes when you are the genius, you come to it so easy and you come to it so
Mhm.
naturally. Like when you do this all the time that you don't actually realize just how many micro steps go into
Right.
something because it just comes naturally. So for people that are really good at this or have been doing it for a really long time, you kind of bypass all of those little tiny things that a beginner might need of like walking you through each
Exactly.
thing. And it can be really frustrating for like a somebody who's been doing it for a while because you number one are like, I don't want to have to write all this out because like it's so much
Yeah.
harder to kind of sit down and talk it
Especially
out
the
and map it out,
manual.
yeah, than to just do it. And that was kind of our experiences. And for somebody like me, I'm like, man, I've led so many 200-hour teacher trainings, but it was a program from somebody else. And so now
Mhm.
trying to sit down and think like, how would I do it? What would I do it differently? And the process was just really humbling because like I mentioned, you really have to like sit down and think, okay, if I were going all the way back to square one, what would each little step be? And it takes
Right.
time. It takes lots of time
Yeah.
though.
And I'm gonna tell you, once you run your first teacher training with the curriculum that you created and submitted, it's like an ongoing process, right? Like you're gonna be like, oh, we should have done this. And then like, you'll get feedback from your students. And it's like, oh, we're gonna add that in next. So it continues to be an ongoing process too.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that you kind of maneuvered it more to being in person. I think that I've done one YTT, a 200, completely virtually, and I really actually enjoyed it. And then I participated in a 300-hour virtually. But of course, the assist part was obviously the thing that we couldn't really do online. And our YTT that we're about to do is a combination of virtual and in person immersion. So we're doing like some stuff pre recorded, some stuff meeting live. And then the last week or graduation is a big retreat. So I'm excited to kind of test that out and see how it goes, just to honestly make stuff a little bit more convenient for people. You do have that element of being able to, yeah, being able to watch it when you can, but you also have that accountability of having these live calls each week to hop on and ask your questions while you're learning. And then at the very end, like really getting to know one another. So we'll have to do another episode after we do it, and I'll let you know kind of how that hybrid model went. But is there anything else as far as yoga teacher trainings or submitting that you'd like to say that would be helpful to people?
You don't need to have it all figured out, would be like some advice that I would give, because I do think that oftentimes we think that we have to see so big picture, but I almost think that it's like it makes you look at truly what you do to impact others' lives and how you want to put that forth. I think in terms of like when I went to my 200-hour, I told you it was so impactful for me, but even still, like I knew that there was things that I would have done differently or changed from just my own experience as a teacher and from a curriculum perspective. So I don't think that we have to like I don't think that I was more knowledgeable than my teacher. I just think that I had a different way of bringing that knowledge forward, and I wanted to do that. And so I hope that other yoga teachers do the same thing, where like you don't have to feel like you know it or you have it all figured out. You're going to figure it out as you're going through it, but you have a specific magic that you need to bring, that the world needs you to bring. Focus on that.
That's great. And it just helps you get started. Are you feeling stuck? If so, this is your exclusive invite to Vortex Yoga Retreat in Sedona, Arizona, this October 11th through 14th, 2024. Sedona's breathtaking red rocks transform into a fiery masterpiece in the autumn. Imagine practicing yoga amidst this stunning backdrop, feeling the ancient vortexes amplify your intentions and awaken your spirit. This retreat is for you if you crave a deeper connection with your energetic body, the chakras, you're ready to align your life with purpose and passion, or you seek a transformational experience to unleash your inner power. Here's what awaits you: 4 days and 3 nights nestled in Sedona's beauty, daily yoga and meditation, delicious local dinners, sound healing, hiking to infamous Sedona vortexes, connection with like-minded souls on this empowering journey, learn chakra balancing principles and practices, and a special gift from your hosts. Don't wait. Space is extremely limited and spots are going fast. Visit rachakaretreats.com/Sedona to book your spot and choose your accommodations, or click the link in the show notes. Use code MYYT for 10% off. Are you ready to balance your energy and align your life? Okay, so you mentioned this in your bio, and it's something that I observed you speaking about online that I'm curious to hear your take on it. Is this concept of storytelling or weaving things together like a tapestry, but specifically, I love how you said like puzzle building. What do you mean by that, and how do you do it in your teaching?
I love storytelling, and I think that a big part of it is puzzle building or dot connecting, where you start to take pieces of your lived experience and see how it connects with pieces of what you're reading or consuming in the world. So, when I first started teaching our yoga teacher training, I would talk about how to write your intent for your sequence. And this is like whether you're quote unquote just a yoga teacher or you're deciding to become a yoga teacher trainer. When you weave your intent into it, we are often taught or told things along the lines of like, use the chakras. And I remember very specifically being like, I'm going to do a heart chakra class. And that means it's going to be back bends and it's going to be heart openers. And I'm going to say something about the color green. And then I'm going to weave in there something about like it was like so generic and like it was fine. Like it's not bad and it's not wrong. But the problem was that like every time I would go to write my intent for my sequences, I felt uncomfortable. Like it didn't make sense to me. Like I was just rote memorizing some information. And so when I started figuring out like how to incorporate my life experiences and my heart situation, so like a heart chakra thing, it made it so much more impactful. So if I think to myself now, I want to do something and then it might still be a backbending class that's heart opener. Like it might still be that. But instead of thinking like, what I need to go get my book and see what it says about the heart chakra, I start with like, what's going on in my life where I feel like I'm softening in my heart? What's going on in my life where I'm like overcoming grief and I want to let my love shine through, where I need to show myself love or somebody else love? And I start from there and I try to find a very specific story or experience, something even that I've been inspired by in a podcast that I've listened to or a book that I've read. So when I teach it now, I ask my students, like, think about what you're reading. And then one of them was like, well, I only read true crime. And so she's like, I can't think of anything from true crime. And I was like, I think that's not true. So an example for that would be like, I read true crime and I don't. So I'm going to be making this up. So if anyone actually does read true crime and I'm butchering this, I'm so sorry. Just in advance. But let's say I did. And I can kind of figure out that like this guy was doing these really terrible things to these women and it's awful. Well, I have an emotional reaction to that. I have a feeling about that guy. And then I get to go through and maybe let's look at the yama and the niyama. We'll do the yama, right? And I have to think like, if I met this guy, what would I do? And my go-to would be some kind of violence. And now I can look at, okay, how can I learn a lesson from this? Because I know that naturally that I want to go towards violence, but I know that ahimsa is important. So how can I start weaving a story together using the pieces of this puzzle to figure out how I can be in the world kind and compassionate, even when someone is coming into the world who's not kind? Now, I'm not saying that your story needs to go and be like unicorns and rainbows and that I'm going to forgive this guy and he's wonderful. But I'm saying it gives you an insight on what areas you're still working on and like what you can do. And when you share those stories as your intent, when you're teaching your classes and your sequences on the mat, it's so much more impactful, and it's coming from a place of you piecing together these puzzle pieces of like, this is going to happen in real life. There's going to be people that do things that I don't agree with. I still have areas in my life where I have different yama that I still need to really focus on and work on. How can I piece these together and come up with a learning of compassion and kindness, even while having the and I don't think what he's doing is right. Learning how to discern, learning how to not judge, learning how to fill in the blank, right? And then building the stories from that, sharing the intent from that. And perhaps the intent might be just being curious about figuring out what areas in the world we're still working on. And all of that came from, well, I read crime traumas. You know what I mean?
I don't know the name, but that's the name now. That's what we're calling it forevermore. That's so funny.
I think that's
I
what they're
love
called. But
that.
anyways.
Yeah. No, I love what you've shared. It's making me think of something one of my teachers used to say too, though, is that as far as connecting the dots, sometimes it's also nice to also feel like you don't have to connect all the dots for your students too, in terms of like giving them the answers or like telling them how they should feel or telling them what they should glean from the story. So it's like there's a fine line between making it cohesive and connected without being like, this is how you should feel,
And this is what you should do.
telling people how to feel and what to do. So, wow, that's really, really valuable. And I hope that it helps people feel like they're sharing more authentically and a little more not so like cookie cutter or like obvious.
You have to start with the obvious, right? Like you do have to start there, I think sometimes, but it's nice if you can start weaving your story into it. So if you're really set on teaching the heart chakra, like I think you ought to, but it's like, how can you make it more personal and not so book logical, I guess, like from the book?
Storytelling is such a useful way to stand out, I feel like, and that it's such a great way for your students to really capture some of these concepts, especially ones that you're teaching that maybe are new concepts or you're presenting them in the Sanskrit language. Like it just sounds like a foreign term. It can help their retention and their comprehension if you're using some of these other elements. And if you're able to say, hey, this concept relates to yoga in this way. And on one hand, you've got the relate, but you also have the illustrate of here's these other examples of maybe where you're seeing it in a movie or a book or a true drama, crime drama.
That.
So I love that it's got to have kind of supporting material, whether it's from life experience. So what I will ask you though is how do you do it in a way that it feels like you're talking about your personal story without it then becoming this whole like 60-minute experience of you talking about yourself to students? And
Yeah, and I get that question a lot.
so what would you say?
So what I like to do is I introduce it talking about it from the standpoint of this is an experience that I had. So usually in the very beginning, I get everybody on their mat, focused, thinking, and then start saying like, I had this experience the other day or something happened the other day or however I start it. And then as I weave it through the rest of the class, I really do try to weave my intent all the way through with how I cue. And so when I weave it through the rest of the class, I try to then turn it around to asking more questions or getting them insightful on them, on their own. Where in your life have you noticed that you aren't forgiving? Or I might say something along the lines of like, ground down through your feet and think about how you could be better grounded if you forgave somebody, or think about an experience or a time when forgiveness would have solved the problem that was longer going than you intended it to be. Just generic examples, on the spot. But I really do try to then bring it back to them. And then at the end, I start with my story. At the end, then I close out my meditations with it being a more introspective focus of if we're talking about nonviolence for the duration of the class, talking about are there ways that you could show compassion for another human that maybe is making choices that you don't agree with. The intro is like, this is my story, this is what was going on, and then the rest of the class is like, let's look at like how that's impacting you. And at the end it's like, when you leave the mat today, how can you be more compassionate? How can you just start getting curious about where in your life you could be a little bit better at practicing this yama?
Beautiful. And I think it's really just tangible and applicable for the listeners to try to implement of kind of that 3-step method that you have throughout the experience of starting with yourself, them, and then the end. I think it's so good to always charge your students with a task. Yogi, what was it? I think it was Kino McGregor's book. Is it called The Yogi's Assignment? I think it might be one of her books where she gives you these little like yogic homework tasks. And for a while, I guess I still kind of really do this, is that the closing of every single class feels like a reminder of like, hey, now you're charged to continue this. Like the real practice kind of begins. How can you carry this seed of insight or this little spark of wisdom into all of your relationships and all that you do? And that it's a real way to help the students feel like it's really just beginning as the yogasana section is kind of ending. So thank you for that. Storyteller, puzzle builder. Do you actually like puzzles in real life?
I do. I do. I actually am doing this puzzle right now that has 4 different parts. So you build the whole puzzle, and then afterwards, I have an envelope that you open the envelope, and it gives you new directions, and you rework the puzzle. I haven't opened the envelope yet, so I can't tell you specifically what the directions are. But it's like, don't open this until the puzzle is complete. I am a puzzler through and through.
Oh my goodness. So that's where you saw the analogy there, is because you do one. My doing puzzles makes me think of my grandmother. She
Oh yeah.
loved puzzles. And when shutdown happened, I tried to get into puzzles. I think a lot of people did because we had nothing else to do. But I found it interesting because I didn't really do many puzzles unless I was with my grandmother. And then when my husband and I went, he wanted to puzzle in such a way that I would never think to puzzle.
Yeah.
He's the type of person who grabs one piece and we'll look at the box where the picture is and find that one piece and then place it where he thinks
It
that
might be in the whole
yes,
scheme.
yes. Is that how you do puzzles? I was like,
No.
what in the world are you doing? And does anybody else do that? Surely there's no one else in the world who does that.
I'm sure there is, but so it's interesting. So I puzzle with my son, and he's only 8. So we puzzle very differently too. So I am like, let's find all the pieces that look like they're the same color and put them all together. So I always start with the edges, which is impossible to do with the puzzle, the current puzzle that I was telling you about, because there's 4 different chunks. So there's 4 sets of edges, and they're not all perfect rectangles. They're different shapes. It's a whole thing. So it's really testing me. But my son likes to wait until I've built out certain pieces, and then he like hyper focuses on this like section. And then me, I'm like, if I find the puzzle, I want to organize them first and then puzzle, but he wants me to puzzle so he can, because he so I think we all just kind of do it so differently, but it's fun. I mean, we've made it work. I try to keep him working on a different section, and then I work on a section, but then he always comes over because he likes that I'm working on this section, so he can see it coming to life. So then he knows how to add to it. It's very interesting.
That is interesting. And I guess it's a good analogy for yoga teachers, whether it's the way that you're kind of planning your yoga class experiences, that there's different ways to kind of like plot it out and sketch it out. But I will say that for the people who have a tendency to kind of hyper fixate and focus, there is some good of just putting the piece down and moving on to something else and coming back to it sometimes. And if you're trying to like make a puzzle piece fit when there's no other puzzle pieces around it, then maybe maybe you gotta go on to something else, and that might help.
I was thinking too when you were saying that, like, I think in terms of like yoga teacher trainings and stuff. So when we created our yoga teacher training, we knew that it was going to be a 10-week thing. It was on the weekends. We were trying to make it most accessible for people. And none of us had children at the time. And now we all have, well, I had a kiddo at the time. I guess my son was really small at the time, but we were still trying to make it work. And then I listened to you explaining how you guys have set up yours, and that sounds like lovely. And I think it's going to be wonderful. But I think we go into it oftentimes thinking like there's only one right way. And really our people are going to come to us and have the yoga experience that they need to have for their lived experience. And I think it's really important to think of that too. Like, the puzzle is going to end up being the puzzle, whatever it is, however you put the pieces together. But your way is not right and my way is not right. It's just different. And looking at how your brain can put together the pieces of the puzzle that it needs to so that it works for you, because you have to be able to teach it. And also knowing that like you're making it more accessible for other yogis to be able to teach yoga eventually is so important. And I think it helps eliminate this fear that like if it's different or someone else is already doing it. I feel like both of those things are like completely opposite sides of the same coin, of like you just have to come and do the thing that you're excited to do, teach yoga and share yoga, and it's going to fall into place the way that it's meant to fall into place. And it's okay, it's perfect, it's right exactly how you set it up, and do it until you change it, because you're going to need to change it at some point.
To really nail in this puzzle analogy, I guess you have to be okay with kind of putting down all the pieces that you can, knowing that there will be, you can't have all the pieces because some of the pieces are the people who are coming to the experience. Like they're the ones that are going to be like completing the picture and bringing in this own unique energy and knowledge and something special is the people. So it might feel like, especially I guess when I think back to what it was like creating it, of course it feels like there's things missing, is because it's the people and that unique singular experience of that one special group. I'm curious to know what you, as a yoga teacher, what you feel like is currently really easy. Like what's going really well for you in your yoga teaching career or yoga teaching? What's currently really fascinating for you?
I think for me right now, it's really the business aspect of it. So I think I spent a lot of time. You read my bio, and I was like laughing because I was like, that's a lot of things that I've done. I spent a lot of time chasing certificates and like wanting to improve my yoga teaching by chasing certificates, but I wasn't giving myself permission to just like be a yoga teacher. And until I started to like let that part be okay, and then pick like hand pick skills, or I guess like nitpick skills that I could actually improve upon, I just kept chasing things. So now that I don't feel like I'm chasing trying to be better at it, I'm really into the business aspect of it, of like how to be smart about building a career around yoga. Because even when I decided to leave, I would say I went from like having a career mindset to like, I'm going to teach one-off classes. I literally, my business plan when I left was I was going to teach 8 classes a week, and I was going to get 10 people paying $20 a class. Like I had this, like the business plan didn't make any sense, but it was literally just, I was like, this is how I'm going to replace my teaching salary because that's all I could think of. Right. And so now, like, actually looking at business building and really diving into how to market, how to have an email list, how to show up consistently, and not just think about it from like an hourly perspective of like, how can I make X amount of dollars per hour, but thinking it from like a bigger business building perspective of like, what's going to happen in 5 years? How can I make my business be a profitable, successful business, whether it's a one person business or you decide to, branch it out and have employees and eventually sell it, which I think like if you talk to business people, like that's like the bigger picture of business, is creating something that's profitable that you can eventually sell. And so now looking at that from terms of that, I would have approached yoga completely different when I left if I would have known what I know now. And so I think that that's been like really my curiosity right now, like chasing that, understanding that, and like looking at how that's possible to go from a yoga teacher to a yoga career, because I've built that and it looks very different than even what my business partner does. Because even though we have the Solstice Yoga School underneath this, we're like Solstice Yoga School, we both have built our careers very differently. And I think now I'm in this like thought process of like, how can we show that there's so many avenues that you can actually bring your yoga teaching down so that you can have it as a career and not just a, and I want to say, because I know that there's a lot of pushback of why, what if I only want to do it part time, or what if I only want to teach? Like, I think that's great. I think that there's another side of it though, where people want this to be a career that's profitable. And so looking at that, like, what are the avenues that you could go down to have a sustainable career living like and being a yogi in it?
Mm-hmm. Same. I am right there with you. Invested so much just this year and really figuring that out as well. So then on the flip side, what do you feel like is the challenge that you're currently like facing with all of that in business building? And what kind of lessons are you learning in that struggle?
So honestly, I think the biggest struggle right now is I still have old beliefs in my head about what it means to have a yoga space. So we had a space that we were using that was ours, and then the pandemic hit, and then it was like a shared space. And then, like, over time, it kind of was no longer ours and we were renting it. And that transition from being fully an in person studio space to like have these to like now it's just fully we are reliant on other locations has been a really big lesson and learning. And it's interesting because I want to go more in the digital space, but I still am attached to and find great value in the in-person space. So I think that my, I guess, rub right now is trying to figure out how to have both, because I think marketing for them was quite different. But then I see like how we met, where we're like, well, we're actually in the same city. Like, I also know what is possible with the internet. So just like trying to figure out, I think, do I want to be fully online? I value that. I'm raising babies. I want to be home with my kiddos. Like, that's a big part of why I left my teaching career in the first place. But also, like, I want to be a grown up and leave my house and not always be with my kids, you know? So like finding that, I'm trying to find that balance still. And I think that that is going, perhaps will be an ongoing struggle, but I don't want it to be a struggle. I'm really trying to find like, what is it that I want and how do I want to serve and maintain and keep giving back in the yoga community?
Beautiful. Again, same. I'm really excited to now know you. I feel like we're both just trying to figure out the same things too. What you said about like wanting to be home with your kiddos, but also sometimes you're like, I just want to see another adult too. Is very real. So I'm looking forward to getting some coffee with you or at least meeting
Yeah,
you.
I can't wait.
Yeah, since we live in the same place. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast and just sharing your wisdom and your energy. You are so beautiful. So, would you tell the listeners where they can connect with you and what else you have coming up?
Thank you. Yeah. So we are going to be doing our Forma Gym Walnut Creek yoga teacher training. So that's up in Northern California. So that one will be coming in February of 25. I can't believe we're almost to 25. It's flying by. But I've been actually looking at different ways to serve just the yoga teachers that are already out there. So I have a couple of things in the pipeline. I want to start doing like sequence building templates so we can start weaving more of unique yoga poses. And by unique, I mean like not just going for the handstands and the arm balances, which is where I started from, but figuring out ways to make the more basic yoga poses feel unique and new, but also interweaving that whole storytelling and intent setting into it. And I've been playing around and toying with the idea of doing 100-hour teacher training, but for the lifelong student. So someone who doesn't necessarily want to become a yoga teacher, but really wants to deepen their own yoga practice, so that they can know what they're doing when they go to yoga classes. So I'm some things coming down the pipeline. And you can find me on Instagram. I'm primarily on Instagram under Clair Thomas _ or Solstice Yoga _
Perfect. Well, to the listeners, thank you for coming back each and every week. And if you loved this episode, please do me a favor and take a screenshot, put it up on your Instagram story, and tag both of us. I am at Master Your Yoga Teaching. And Claire, one more time, will you tell that your handle?
Yep, at Clair Thomas, CLAIRTHOMAS _
And let us know what you loved about this episode. What was your biggest takeaway? We'd be so happy to celebrate in real time with you for listening and reshare. And until next week, namaste blessed. Thanks for listening. If this is your first time, peruse our feed to see if there's something else that will serve you. We're so grateful that you're here and invite you to join our inner circle by subscribing to our newsletter. If this episode resonated with you, help us spread the word by sending it to a friend who needs to hear this message. Likes, follows, sends, shares, and reviews help us to continue delivering high-quality content to you for free each and every week. Don't forget to tag @MasterYourYogaTeaching so we can reshare. I am a certified yogi. However, this podcast is intended for information and entertainment only. If you are interested in mentorship or coaching with me, check out the website linked in the show notes to get more information. This content and other content produced by CLW Studios and affiliated partners is not therapy, and nothing in this content indicates a therapeutic relationship. Any opinions of guests on the podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of Mackenzie or CLW Studios. Learn more about Mackenzie, her guests, and CLW Studios by following the links in the show notes. Keep shining, and we will see you next Wednesday for another dose of Master Your Yoga Teaching. Namaste blessed.